Hello, people, and we're back. Hopefully for maybe the last session. No, hopefully, because it's been quite enjoyable. But I've been getting some late nights. I've like got to my bed at 3 in the morning reading these books and getting up at 7. I mean, a few hours sleep. So once I get these chapters read, I can get back to getting a wee bit of decent night's sleep. But I kind of want to get this finished and get it done. And then the purpose of these books as well. When you join me on my live streams and go to certain sites or ancient monuments, these books can help you understand what you're actually looking at and who built them or what was observed around them. So this is all decent information to make us understand places we visit on our live streams when you come with me. And whilst we're walking about these live streams, you can chat and remind me certain things I've spoken about in these books that I've maybe forgot that we might see on our travels. So I think it's all good. It's all good. It's like part of the journey, and that's the way this channel is going to be, guys. Like I'll be researching one thing, it'll lead me to another. I'll see certain areas come up, then I'll be going to that area. You'll be coming with me. We'll be researching that area, try to find little tidbits here and there that might lead me to another place. So it's cool. Again, it's like this interlocking journey. It's not just one day we'll talk about Robert the Bruce and one day we'll talk about Hill Forts. Again, there's a lot of mainstream sort of Scottish history and British history sites that are just kind of that BBC quality. I mean, this is homegrown research, and all you guys play a big part. And like I said, jedskepticmedia.com. Get your research in there and we'll research together and get the conversation going. But I'm really enjoying this book, guys, and I hope you are too. And without further ado, and these are, from what you can see right now, from the very top to the bottom, these are the last of the chapters from Pillar Stones to the Lafell, or the Stone of Destiny, which we were talking about earlier, which was Jacob's stone. He fell asleep on, and he could see the angels going up and down heaven, up to heaven on the Jacob's ladder. So I'll just let a couple of you get in first before I start, because I just had a reading like 20 minutes ago, so I told everybody I was doing it. I'll let a few people get in, get comfy, get tucked into their beds, listen to their old Irish tales as they're falling asleep, listen to Jed's boring voice. Like I said, I've had remarks and comments that my voice puts them to sleep, or they listen to my voice when they're in their beds. So I suppose it's good. At least it's soothing. And you wouldn't want to listen to Jimmy Savile when you're lying in your bed. And I take it as a compliment in a way. Right. Let's see who's in the chat. And first up is my boy D. D, man, you need to drop a link to that other channel that you do your kayaking and your other stuff on, because I miss watching you, man. I've got to say. Same with Okai and all the other guys, man. I miss sort of listening to you. No Mask is back. I'm not too late tonight. This is early for me. It's coming up for midnight. This is early for one of my book readings. Oh, there's Mick. How you doing, man? I'm too late for my British viewers a lot of the time. A lot of the time, my British viewers are like listening to me in the morning. They're getting up and they're probably fucking on their way to work in the car, or fucking in their earphones on the bus. Right, people. Let's continue this. And good to see you, Mick. I never seen you in the last one. Right, let's get this mouse sorted there. Right. Where were we? So we're on to the pillar stones. See, there's all different types of stones, guys. They're not just standing stones and stone circles. There's Logan stones and pillar stones and dolmens and cromlechs and all kinds of different stones for different purposes. I think a lot of them did serve solar purposes, like big sundials. Right. Back to Irish Druids and old Irish religions, 1894. So you got to remember, guys, this is 1894. A lot of these stone circles and cromlechs and these things will be destroyed now. Can farmers clear them off the fields? I mean, a lot of these things mentioned, oh, there'll be this and that there. I'll probably go there and it's not there anymore. Or there'll be just remnants at maybe one stone instead of 12 or whatever. Right, anyway, guys, there are pillar stones indicating phallic origin. That on Tara Hill was popularly known as Bod Thiarge, with a special reference to the generative force. Several of them bore names connecting them with the Tuatha, as Cairtaid Catha Tuatha de Danann, the pillar stone of battle. The ship temple of Mayo was Leba na Fatak, the giant's bed. The cloaker or gold stone at Oriel, Monaghan County, spoke like an oracle, so did the Liafail. The off-white stone of old, the anointed betiles of Sankonathion, or Sankonathan. It is even reported of Eusebius that he carried such in his bosom to get fresh oracles from them. Mizzou calls some mad stones. Pliny notices moving stones. The old Irish had the rumbling stones. The Celtic clacha brath or judgment stones must have been gifted with sound and power, yet La Vega is simply a way of accounting for these reverential objects as the demons worked on them. One may credit priests with hypnotic power, or we may think, with a writer, that without magic there could be of no speaking stones. Talking about priests, if you notice, guys, I've used the thumbnails of these readings. All of them have been generated on the AI, but I've put like photos of myself and photos of landscapes and my photos of my trees and my rocks and stuff like that. And I've let the AI do its work, and wow, you get some crazy stuff. And I just thought I'd use them as thumbnails, which is pretty cool. Like, you've got to look into that. Playground.com is one of them. Right. Some holy stones had a curious histories. The hallowed pillow stone of St. Bute had been flung into the brain of Concobar MacNess, where it stayed 7 years, but fell out one Good Friday. Another stone was mentioned in the Book of Leinster as causing the death of an old woman, 150 years old, who, having brought into a great plain, was so charmed with the sight that she would never go back to her mountains, preferring death there by knocking her whole old head upon the stone. Elf shots, the stone arrowheads of their ancestors, were long regarded with reverence, as with Western Islanders. They served as charms for the Irish, being sometimes set in silver and worn as amulets about the neck, protecting the wearer against the spiritual discharges of elf shots from malignant enemies. They were the arrows of fairies. They ought not to be brought into a house. In 1713, Lyd found this superstition existent in the West. Martin speaks of finding at Iniskia a rude-looking stone kept wrapped up in a flannel and only in the charge of an old woman, as formerly with a pagan priestess. On a stormy day it might be brought out with a certain magical observances, in the confident expectation of bringing a ship on shore for the benefit of the wreck-loving islanders. The Nivogai, as the stone was called, did service in calming the sea when the men went out fishing. It was equally efficacious in sickness when certain charms were muttered over the stone. We have been privately shown by an Australian Aborigine a similar sacred stone, a quartz crystal in that case, wrapped up in a dirty rag, protected from the eyes of women. Bukowski in 1760 saw pieces of a stone on Icholm Kill used to cure a prevalent flux. Walhouse regarded such superstition as belonging to the Turanian races and as antagonistic to the Aryan genius and feeling. Gomme esteems stone worship as opposed to the general basis of Aryan culture. The unshapely stones worshipped in India belong to non-Aryan tribes. Authors then contend that this Irish form of belief came not from the Celts, though accepted by them. Rind amusingly talks of a non-Aryan native of Ireland who paid unwelcome visits to this country as a Scot. That Scot by and learned a Celtic language and insisted on being treated as a Celt, as a Goidel. As it was a non-Aryan or Tartar race that introduced magic and devils into Assyria, so may the same have been here, the originators of stone worship and the superstitions long before the Celts reached these islands. As with other peoples, the Pluto and his attendants were believed to have been no less connected with the celebrated stones than were the giants themselves. The story told by a Welsh visitor into Ireland 700 years ago preserved an Irish tradition of stones. There was in Ireland, in ancient times, a pile of stones worthy of admiration called the Giant's Dance, because giants from the remotest parts of Africa brought them into Ireland, and on the plains of Kildare, not far from the castle of the Vase, as well by force of art as strength, miraculously set them up. Those stones, according to British story, Aurelius Ambrosius, king of the Britons, procured Merlin by supernatural means to bring from Ireland into Britain. This origin of Stonehenge was long accepted as history. If not holy stones, they were, at least, indebted for their ramblings to the exercise of demonical or occult powers. They came not from heaven, as did those of Phrygia, Mount Ida, etc. Various authors have contended that our ancestors in the British Isles were never so lost to common sense as to worship or reverence stones, though other peoples may have done so. O'Curry considers cromlechs never were intended and never used as altars or places of sacrifice of any kind, that they were not in any sense of the word druidical. In this opinion, he is opposed to Welsh, English, and Irish writers, but Arthur Clive declared, "Our Irish ancestors of Aryan race worshipped the air, stone, and fire." Forbes Leslie conceives that many figures represented on stones are disconnected from the Christian symbol. Certainly, the comb shape, so common upon inscribed stones, may be viewed as Indo-Scythian coins. The zigzag was a Gnostic sign. The double disc and scepter symbol may refer to a solar worship, as that of the crescent and scepter to the lunar worship. A Buddhist origin is attributed to inscriptions by Dr. G. Moore. Dr. Longmuir considers them the earliest existing records of the ideas cherished in these islands. Leslie looks at them associated with the old Oriental divination. Tate esteems them to express some religious sentiments or to aid in the performance of some religious rites. Not a few regard them as emblems of religious worship. The meaning of the cup symbol, observed on stones at Fermanagh and in the west of Kerry, has puzzled the learned. In India, it is frequently found both with and without grooves. The common observance upon crucifixes and on mortuary urns would seem to bear a religious significance. Professor T.J. Simpson imagines the emblem connected in some way with the religious thought and doctrines of those who carved them. He saw no reason to doubt the origin of cup and ring being still earlier than even the age of the earliest Celts. So this might be a misconception that these stone circles, these carvings, the ancient, were down to the Celts, when the Celts were possibly later on. But at the same time, once the Celts came over, they worshipped them as well and used them. Valency, commenting upon the spiral marks at Newgrange, fancifully says, "The three symbols, three spirals, represent the supreme being or first cause." The most wonderful and deeply reverenced Irish stone was the Fal, by some strangely enough identified with the coronation stone brought by King Edward from Scotland to Westminster Abbey, a bronze de Jubenville gives this account of it. Con Kitchatnak, chief king of Ireland in the 2nd century, accidentally put his foot on a magical stone called Fal, which had been brought to Ireland by the Tuatha de Danann. It cried out, so that all in Tara heard it. 3 Druids present were asked what the cry meant, where the stone came from, whither it would go, and who had brought it to Tara. They asked a delay of 53 days, and they answered all but the first question. They could only say that the stone had prophesied. The number of its cries was the number of kings of the royal race, but the Druids could not tell their names. Lug then appeared to them, takes Con to his palace, and prophesies to him the length of his reign and the names of his successors. A number of idle legends are attached to the foul stone. As late as 1649, commissioners were appointed by the Scottish General Assembly to dispel the popular superstitions respecting sacred stones. In Ireland, the superstitious observance had a longer possession of people's minds. As circles are known in Icelandic as Dom Ringa, or Doom Rings of Judgment, it has been suggested that Stonehenge itself may have been a chief seat of judgment with the foreign colony, whose capital on Salisbury Plain may have been the Sorbiodunum, afterwards Sarum. Clemens Alexandrinus spoke of stones as images of God. Aurelius Antonius brought to Rome a black stone and paid homage to it. The Laplanders, until lately, sacrificed the reindeer to a stone. Lactantius records the worship of Terminus in the form of a stone. Damascus mentions consecrated stones in Syria. Black stones are still honoured at Mecca, Benares, and elsewhere. Herodian names one worshipped by the Phoenicians, since it fell from heaven. In a letter to Sir Joseph Banks by our Neapolitan minister, the antiquary Sir William Hamilton, there is an allusion to a standing stone at Isernia that was duly dedicated to Saints Cosmo and Damiano. Astel's FRS in 1798 remarked, "The ancient practice of consecrating pagan antiquities to religious purposes has been continued to modern times." Animal worship. That religion was early associated with animals admits of no question. The Apis worship of Egypt prevailed several thousand years before Christ. Animals have served as totems to the tribes of America and other parts, but have been certainly regarded as religious symbols in most lands. The 4 evangelists are said to this day symbolized by such creatures. How far this reverence from association with an idea degenerated into absolute worship of the living thing is a well recognized fact of history. Everyone knows that the 12 signs of the zodiac, to distinguish periods of time, were named after animals, and are so to this day. The Chinese cycle is called after the rat, ox, tiger, hare, dragon, serpent, horse, goat, monkey, cock, dog, and pig. Abel Remusat notes, the cycle of 12 animals imagined by the Kyrgyz is now in use through nearly all Eastern Asia. Irish literature is full of tales respecting animals, particularly in connection with sorcery. Cats, dogs, bulls, cows, horses, and boars figure largely therein. St. Kieran frustrated the mischief intended by a cat in the discharge of a red-hot bar from a blacksmith's forge. Because so many Irish stories are about the magical feats of lower animals, and such a number of places in Ireland are named after them, it has been supposed, said Patrick Kennedy, that the early Irish paid them the same divine honours as the Egyptians had done. Birds share in the veneration. The dove, which was held sacred at Hierapolis and the symbol of Mithras, was honoured in West Scotland and in Ireland, for Balandus records that a snow-white dove with a golden bill was wont to sit on the head of St. Kentigern while occupied in sacred rites. The name of St. Columba also suggested the dove. The wren is not yet forgotten in Ireland. It was thought to be the king of birds. It was hunted as the cutty wren and is still hunted on St. Stephen's Day, the 26th of December, the winter solstice. There, and in western Scotland, it has been known as the Lady of Heaven's hen, with this refrain: the wren, the king of all birds. St. Stephen's Day was caught in the furs. Although he is little, his family's great. I pray you, good landlady, give us a trait. The French hunt and kill it devotionally on 12th day. Contributions should then be collected in a stocking. After the bird has been solemnly buried in the churchyard, a feast and a dance terminate the ceremony. The wren in some way symbolises the sun and was once sacrificed to Pluto. It perhaps represented the weak sun. Mauryan tells his readers the Druids, instead of a dove, employed a wren to symbolise the sun's divinity, escaping into Archite shrine to save himself from the murderous pursuers. The worshipful animal, says J.G. Fraser, is killed with a special solemnity once a year, and before or immediately after the death, he is promenaded from door to door, that each of his worshippers may receive a portion of the divine virtues that are supposed to emanate from the dead or dying god. The hare, in like manner, was hunted once a year, but that was on May Day. The modern Irish fancied it robbed his milch cows of the sweet draught that belonged by right to himself. On the other hand, hares have been styled Saint Monacella's lambs, being placed under her special protection. This is probably where Easter, the hare, and the Easter comes from, the Easter rabbit. The hare, however, was certainly reverenced in Egypt, and at Dendara was to be seen the hare-headed deity. Caesar mentions that the Celts would not eat of the animal any more than did the Pythagoreans. In Irish tales, witch hares are declared to be only caught by a black greyhound. Elsewhere, it is stated that as the Cashel Cathedral, an ornament figures a couple of hares complacently feeding upon some trilobed foliage as the shamrock. And it's funny just mentioning the black greyhound. There's a place called Linlithgow not far from me, and it had a famous pub, and it's got a famous dog associated with the area, and it was the black bitch. And one of the pub itself was a black bitch. But there's a statue of this dog. It's been changed now because of the cancel culture. Okay, we can't have a pub called the Black Bitch anymore. But there's still signs of the Black Bitch in the area because it's a legend. And there's a statue of this dog, and it's certainly a black greyhound. And so just reading that just brought images of this dog from Linlithgow, the Black Bitch. The hare, however, was certainly reverenced in Egypt, and that Dendara was seen to be the hare-headed deity. Oh wait, I've already read that. Only a few months since a traveller gave an illustration of the persistence of some meaning being attached to the hare, even among the educated and Christian fishermen of Aberdeen. When out at sea and in some danger from bad weather, it is thought unfortunate and even calamitous for any one in the boat to mention the name of this creature. That animal reverence, to say the least of it, continued not in Ireland alone, but even in Scotland, among those of the same race, to quite modern times, is manifest from the fierce denunciation of certain practices relating thereto. The Presbytery of Dingwall, Ross, on September the 5th, 1656, made special reference to the heathenish customs then prevalent in the north of pouring out libations of milk upon the hills, of adoring stones and wells, and above all, of sacrificing bulls. The Ossianic transactions contain some references to the Irish holy bulls and cows. The bull has been called the deity of the Ark. In the Owen Connellan's translation of Proceedings of the Great Bardic Institution is an account of a magical cow which supplied milk to 90 nuns at Tuam Dagnalan. This is very like the tale of the Tuath Smith Glass Gabney, or grey cow, which nourished a large family and its numerous dependents. Though stolen by the general of the roving Fomorians, she contrived to live on and practice her benevolence until the 5th century. Her camping places, numerous as they were, are localities recognised by Irish countryfolk to this day. There is also the story of Dermot mac Cairnbal, half Druid, half Christian, who killed his son because he had caused the death of a sacred cow. As to the 9 scores of nuns of Tuam, it must be noticed that the word Caelach served alike for nun and druidess. This led W. Hackett in the Transactions to observe, the probability is that they were pagan druidesses and that the cows were living idols like Apis, or in some sense considered sacred animals. Nice. So we've now got Ulick McGee in the house and Sonia. Nice to see you, Sonia. Nice to see you, Ulick. Good to see you all. I'll just get this done, get this continued. See how many chapters have we got? We're on to Sacred Pigs. Right, where are we? Where are we, guys? We've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 or 15 chapters there. So, right, we're on to the Sacred Pigs. The pig must be placed among the sacred animals of Ireland. It was of various nations of antiquity. Was not the place known of old as Mucinus or Hog Island? Did not Giraldus Cambrensis say in the 12th century that he had never seen so many swine as in Ireland? And who would dispute the honour given still to the gentleman who pays the rent? The boar was sacred to Diana, who sent forth the destroying Caledonian boar to ravage the country, but which was slain by Theseus. The Hindu divine mother, Varahi, was the earth soul. The third avatar of Vishnu, Varaha, had a boar's head. A cypress gem bears the image of a flying boar, believed to represent Adonis, who was killed by a boar. Sacrifices of black pigs were made to Mars Silvanus. The soul was sacred to Isis and sacrificed to Osiris. It was sacred to Demeter or Ceres, as represented the corn spirit. In Egypt, during later periods, the boar personated Typhon. In the picture of the Last Judgment, to be seen on the famous sarcophagus at the Sloane Museum of Lincoln's Inn Fields, the condemned soul is observed transformed into a pig. One of the Phoenician gods is beheld holding one by the tail. The Jews were not to keep, eat, or even touch the creature which was held sacred as devoted to evil. Certain passages as Isaiah 3 and 4 are curious in relation to it. Although swine and their herdsmen, says Gladstone, were deemed unclean, there was a very particular and solemn injunction for the sacrifice of 2 swine to Osiris and to the moon by every Egyptian. The poor, who could not supply the animals, offered the figures of swine made of dough. The Phoenician priests, like those of Druidism, were called swine. A soul figure has been found in the ruins of Mashonaland, Zimbabwe, both on pottery and carved in soapstone. Mahomet was satisfied that no unclean animal did not exist before the Ark days. The pig was once slain for divination purposes. So Muhammad was satisfied that so unclean an animal did not exist before the Ark days. The prophet of old condemned those who sacrificed in gardens and who ate swine's flesh. Was it because the neighbouring Syrians were accustomed in fear to do homage to the destroyer of Adonis? Or did the Jews abstain from eating it from the fear of offending an adverse power? The Norsemen offered the pig to their sun god, killed at the winter solstice. The animal appears on Gaulish coins, under or over a horse, and the fleur de lis. It was a national symbol of Gaul, as seen in their standards. And it's funny that they mentioned that maybe the fact that Jews don't eat pigs is because they revere it. That's interesting. The sow and its young are oddly associated with a search after a sacred spot. Aeneas, when in Italy, was said to have built his town where he met a sow with 30 sucklings. On the front of Croyland Abbey may still be seen the sculptured sow and pigs under a tree that led the founder of this monastery to fix his abode on the island of the Fens. A Breton poem, or Rannoch, the Numbers, mentions a wild sow with her 5 young ones that called the children under an apple tree when the wild boar came to give them a lesson. A Welsh poem begins with, "Give ear, little pigs," meaning disciples. One of the triads speaks of the 3 powerful swineherds. The priest of Ceridwen, or Which, was Turch the boar. The animal is prominent on the cross of Dorston, Forfarshire. Glastonbury is said to be derived from Glassting, who, after a sow with 8 legs, found her with her young ones under an apple tree, upon which he was content to die on that spot. Both St. Germanus and St. Patrick are associated with the animal. Down to the Middle Ages, says an author, some supernatural power is ascribed to it, as we read of a soul being tried for witchcraft, pronounced guilty, and duly executed. It may be presumed that no one, however much admiring pork, partook of her flesh. The Irish Brehon law had these 2 references to it. The pig was a tripartite division, 1/3 for her body, 1/3 for her expectation. Now, what's that? 1/3 for her expectation, and 1/3 for her farrow. The trespass of swine is described as the crimes of the pigs. All such creatures were ordered to be kept in the sty at night. The story of the boar of Bean Gulbane, which caused the death of Dermot, the captor of the beautiful grain, after he had killed it, through his heel being pierced by its bristles, is very like the classical one of the death of Adonis. Heroes were accustomed to fight against wild boars and enchanters. The Druids were rather fond of pigs, since these had a liking for acorns, the produce of the saintly oak. Yet they, as priests, were the swine of Mon and swine of the sacred cord. Like the Kabiri, they were young swine. The Druids were much given to transforming persons into what were known as Druidic pigs. When the Milesians sought for Ireland in their voyage, the Tuatha, by magic, caused a fog to rise so as to make the land assume the appearance of a large pig, whence it got the appellation of Innis na Moose, or Isle of Pig, or Muck Innis, Hog Island. A wonderful tale is told of a fabulous pig kept by a king of Leinster, Misgegra Mac Datho, who fed it daily from the milk of 60 cows. Welsh stories are told of fighting swine. At the end of a Welsh bonfire, the people used to shout out, "The cropped black sow seized the hindermost," when all would run in haste away. The pig in Irish, muck orc and torc, when a possessed animal, was a decided danger as well as a nuisance. The hero Fionn had several notable adventures in pursuit of such, as the torc of Glen Torrain and the boar of Slave Muck. Reminds me of Shrek for some reason. I'm getting Shrek feelings here. this orc, muck, orc. I'm getting Shrek feelings, and the way Shrek looks, with that pig nose that he's got. According to an Ogham inscription at Ballyquin, the pig was sacred to the goddess of Anar Ain. It is said, "A sacrifice of swine is the sovereign right of Anna." There are still sacred pigs in some Buddhist temples. Tacitus speaks of the Estai of North Germany, worshipping the goddess of Frigga, after whom our Friday is called, in the form of a pig. As the Reverend J. Rice Byrne translate the passage, they worship the mother of the gods as the emblem of their superstition. They are used to bear the figures of boars, i.e., in sacred processions to Frigga. In the Proceedings of the Great Bardic Institution, Irish, there is a paper by W. Hackett who writes, in pagan times the pig was held as sacred in Ireland as it is held at the present day in the religious systems of India and China. It was his expressed opinion that all the legends of porcine animals which abound in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland had reference to the suppression of a form of idolatry analogous to, if not identical with, the existing worship of the Hindu deity Vishnu in his avatar as a boar. And you see it a lot with the Pictish symbols. The Picts like their boars as well. Certainly the Irish, like the Germans, are still admirers of the pig. Witches and pigs are mixed up in stories, but then Gom's ethnology and folklore tells us the connection between witches and the lower animals is a very close one. It has been affirmed that the footmarks of St. Mankin's cow can yet be distinguished upon the stones they walked over in Ireland. Animals were known to be offered by Irish and Scotch down to the last century, and it is recorded that a calf was publicly burnt in 1800 by Cornishmen to stop a murrain. A sheep was sometimes offered for the like purpose in some parts of England. In 1678, 4 men were tried for sacrificing a bull in a heathenish manner in the island of St. Rufus for the recovery of health of Kirstine Mackenzie. Animals were also killed in honour of St. Martin's Day. A remarkable story is quoted by the president of the Folklore Society from an old writer of sheep being offered to a wooden image in times of sickness. The skin of sheep was put round the sick person, and the neighbours devoutly ate the carcass. This occurred at Ballyverney, County Cork. The story is related to the folly of pilgrimages. So on to the shamrock. The shamrock and other sacred plants. So that was interesting. Quite a lot there about the pig. And it is interesting to think, rather than the pig being a dirty animal, and the reason why they don't eat the pig is because it's so dirty, rather than they worshipped it. And it's the same with the fish. It's the same way that with the ancient Scots didn't really touch the rivers or the sea for their fish, because they revered the sea and the sea gods. How you doing, Barbara McGill? Witchcraft. There's something to that craft stuff. It's good to see you, Barbara. Sonia White says 60 nuns. So Sonia and Ulick are Irish, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see that people are learning their ancestral culture, should we say. Just having a quick smoke and a look at the chat, guys. Give me a wee break from my reading. So D says, the dirty animal came from Pulp Fiction. They don't eat pork because they are told not to, is all. Well, they say that the pig's dirty, but is it any dirtier than any other animal? What other animal wipes his own arse like? I'm sure sheep and other animals stink just as much as a pig if you're laying beside one. Anyway, guys, on to the next chapter, and it's about shamrocks and other sacred plants. Here we go. The shamrock is even more typical of Ireland than the oak is of Britain, and was the greater object of reverence and regard. Chosen leaf of bard and chief, old Erin's native shamrock, says Valor, see, they spring for me, those leafy gems of morning. Says love, no, no, for me they grow, my vagrant path adorning. But wit perceives the triple leaves and cries, oh, do not serve her. A type that blends three godlike friends, love, valour, wit forever. Oh, the shamrock, the green immortal shamrock. But Moore might have added the claims of religion. Is it not a sacred emblem of the Trinity? Does not the legend remind us of St. Patrick convincing his doubting hearers of the truth of the three in one doctrine by holding up a piece of shamrock? It is true that the Philosophical magazine, June 1830, throws some doubt on the story, since the three-leaved white clover, now accepted as a symbol, was hardly expanded so early in the year as St. Patrick's Day, and Irishmen to this day do not agree which is the real shamrock. The trefoil that was sour was certainly eaten by the primitive Irish, while the white clover, not being sour, was not eaten. It may, therefore, have been the wood sorrel, a trefoil out in the early spring. Spencer says, if they found a plot of watercresses or shamrocks, there they flocked as to a feast. Wither wrote, and feed on shamrocks as the Irish do. The word shamrock, or shamrog, is applied to various trefoils. However, by Erse and Gaelic writers, though ancient herbalists knew only the sour variety by that appellation. The Gaelic Seamarog is a little Seamar trefoil. Dr. Moore of Glasnevin declares the black, non-such Medigaco lupulina to be the true shamrock, though the white clover is often sold for it. The pious Angelico introduced the white clover in his sacred pictures, like the crucifixion, and as Ruskin thinks, with a view to its chemical property. Its antiquity is vouched for, Dr. Madden sings. "'Tis the sunshine of Erin that glimmered of old, on the banners of green we have loved to behold, on the shamrock of Erin and the Emerald Isle." Ancient bards declare that it was an object of worship with the remote race of Tuath de Dananns. It was the emblem of the vernal equinox with the Druids. Greek emblems of the equinox were triform. As a simrag, it was long used as an anodyne, being seen gathered for that purpose by Scotch wives as late as 1794. It must, however, be gathered by the left hand in silence to preserve its virtues. The four-leaved shamrock is called Mary's shamrock. According to an engraving in Ledwich's Antiquities of Ireland, the shamrock appears on the oldest Irish coin. It is the badge of the Order of St. Patrick, founded in 1783, and the national badge since 1801. Pale or Cambridge blue, not green, is the true national colour of Ireland. So pale blue is the true national colour of Ireland, not green. But Ireland cannot claim sole possession of it as a sacred symbol. It was a three-leaved wand of Hermes, the triple oracle of the ancients. It was the three-leaved sceptre of Trifilian Jove. It was seen on the head of Isis, of Osiris, and the god of Mexico. It was recognized both on Persia and the Irish crowns. We perceive upon a monument from Nineveh a couple of sacred hares engaged in devouring it. The Berlin Museum has a representation of some rude satyrs jestingly offering it to a woman. Artists in the Middle Ages have shamelessly made it the plant presented by the angel to the Virgin Mary. The Bismarcks use the shamrock with the motto to trinitate robber. The sacred Palasa of India has triple leaves. The French, like the Irish, retained it as a national symbol. To this hour, the three-leaved or fleur-de-lis plant is preserved as a sacred symbol in architecture, on altar cloths, etc., the emblem being now seen in nonconformist churches as well as in the Episcopalian. It was a 3-in-1 mystery. Adorning the head of Osiris, it fell off at the moment of his death. As the trefoil symbolized generative forces in man, the loss of the garland was a deprivation of vigor in the god, or, as some think, the suspension of animal strength in winter. In the Dublin Museum is a beautiful copper vessel or plate with a trefoil from Japan. In the Mellor Church of Derbyshire is a very ancient fort with rude figures of horses and men with Norman helmets. The tails of those horses, after passing round the body, end in a rude form of a trefoil, which another horse with open mouth is prepared to eat, while its own long tail is similarly presented to the mouth of its equine neighbour. The shamrock was mysteriously engraved on the neck of the oriental crucified figure in the relic collection at Glendalough. The oak was also venerated by the early Irish. We read of Kildare, the Druids' cell or church of the oak, Mag Adair or Dermag, the fields of oaks, the Dare Calcag, now Londonderry, the wood of Calgag, Derby, Derby, now Valentine, Isle of Kerry, the place producing oaks. Derrynane was Dor Fionnain, the oak grove of the Fenian. Dior Malin, now Derry Villan, the grove of Malin. Derada Diorfada, the long oak. Derrybeg, little oak. Derry Duff, black oak wood. Derry is from Doire or Dare, oak. Kildare was Kildara, the church of the oak. St. Bridget of Kildare built her cell, it is said, under a very high oak. Hanmer wrote, Bridget builded a cell for her abode under a goodly fair oak, which afterwards grew to be a monastery of virgins called Kildara, in Latin Cella Quercus. Druids were so named after Dare, Doir, or Dur, the oak. The Druids were Deroi, or dwellers in oaks. There was the Gaulish Druss, or Dris, the Gaelic Daru, the Saxon Dre, or Dry, the Breton Dir, the Persian Druact, the Sanskrit Dra. The oak was thought sacred from its acorns being food for man in his savage state. It was dedicated to Mars and Jupiter. Etrurian inscriptions appear about the oak. The temple of the oracular Dodona was in an oak forest. We read that 456 BC, a Roman consul took an oak solemnly to witness as a god. That tree was a symbol of the Gaulish deity Hesus, as it was the German Thor. The Dryades were priests of the oak. It was associated with the Tau, or cross. So far as I know, says Furlong, the cutting of a live oak into a Tau, or deity, is unique on the part of the Druids. The stones in Sikkim were placed under an oak. The oak, or terebinth of Mamre, was worshipped as late as the 4th century. The oak was sacred as the acorn, and its cup represented the male and female principles. So the mistletoe. The mistletoe had an early reputation as a guide to the other world. Armed with that golden branch, one could pass to Pluto's realm. Charon opposed, they showed the branch, they showed the bough that lay beneath the vest. At once his rising wrath was hushed to the rest. Its connection with health as the all-heal is noted by the poet Callimachus under the appellation of Panacea, sacred to Apollo. Where are the genial Panchaea falls, health crowns the state and safety guards the walls. As the seat of the life of the oak, as then believed, had special virtues as a healer. The coal crenny or omen sticks were made of it, and also divining rods. It has the merit of revealing treasure and repelling the unwelcome visits of evil spirits. When cut upon St. John's Eve, its power for good was greatest. While the shamrock is emblematic of the equinox, The mistletoe is associated with the solstice, says St. Clair. The ancient Persians knew it as the healer. It told of the sun's return to earth. Farmers in Britain used to give a sprig of mistletoe to the first cow calving in the year. Furlong points out the recovery of old heathen ideas, saying Christian priests forbade the mistletoe to enter their churches, but yet it not only got in, but found a place over the altars and was held to betoken good will to all of mankind. It was mysteriously associated with the dove. The Irish called it the Ul Iceach, the Welsh Ucalwyd. The County Magazine for 1792 remarked, "A custom of kissing the woman under the mistletoe bush still prevails in many places, and without doubt the surest way to prove prolific. Pliny considered it good for sterility. It was the only thing that could slay the gentle Balder. In England there are some 20 trees on which the mistletoe may grow." Certain plants have at different times been the objects of special consideration and worshipped as having divine qualities or being possessed by a soul. Some were thought to manifest sympathetic feelings with the nation by which they were cherished. The fetish tree of Kumasi fell when Wolsey's ultimatum reached the king of Ashanti. The ruthless cutting of trees was deemed cruel. Even if they had no living spirit of their own, the souls of the dead might be therefore confined, but perhaps Mr. Gladstone, the tree feller, is no believer in that spiritual doctrine. In Germany, one may still witness the marrying of trees on Christmas Eve with straw ropes that they may yield well. Their forefathers' regard for the world tree, the ash, Yggdrasil, may incline Germans to spare trees and raise them, as Bismarcks loved to do. Women there and elsewhere found consolation from moving round a sacred tree on the approach of nature's trial. The oldest altars stood under trees, as by sacred fountains or wells, but some had to be shunned as demonic trees. The Irish respected the carthame, the quicken tree, quickbeam, rowan, or mountain ash, which had magical qualities. And this is what we were talking about earlier in earlier videos about the ash tree and S, how S and ash, and even nin, the word nin relates to ash and S, Saint Ninian. Right, anyway, where were we? Mountain ash, which had magical qualities. In the story of the fairy palace of the quicken tree, we read of Finn, the Fenian leader, being held in that tree by enchantment, as was Merlin by the fairy lady. Macuiquel, son of the hazel, one of the last Tuath kings, was so called because he worshipped the hazel. Fairies danced beneath the hawthorn. Ogham tablets were of yew. Lady Wilde styled the elder a sacred tree, and the blackthorn, to which the Irishman is said to be still devoted as a sacred tree. Trees of knowledge have been recognized east and west, that of India and the Kalpa. The Celtic tree of life was not unlike that of Carthage. The Persians, Assyrians, and the American Indians had their trees of life. One Egyptian holy tree had 7 branches on each side. From the sycamore, the goddess Nu provided the liquor of life. From the Persi, the god Hathor gave fruits of immortality. The date palm was sacred to Osiris 6,000 years ago. The tree of life was sometimes depicted on coffins with human arms. The lotus, essentially phallic, self-produced, was an emblem of self-created deity, being worshipped as such at least 3000 BC. Homa was the life tree of Zoroaster. The bean was thrown on tombs as a sign of immortality. The banyan and the onion denote a new incarnation. The Indian and Kingalese bow, or Asvasa, Ficus religiosa, sheltered Gautama when he gained what is known as entire sanctification or perfection. The sacred peepul is the male fig, the female being Ficus indica. The fig entwines itself around the palm. The tulsi, Occamum Sanctum and the Amrita are also worshipped in India. So are the Lane Hua or Nelambium in China, the cypress in Mexico, and the aspen in Kyrgyzland. Trees and plants were devoted to gods, as the oak, palm, and ash to Jupiter, the rose, myrtle, and the poppy to Venus, the pomegranate to Proserpine, the pineapple to Cybele, and I visited the building, people. You should check that video out. The pineapple building. It's crazy. The orange to Diana, the white violet to Vesta, the daisy to Aclestis, the wild thyme to the Muses, the laurel to Apollo, the poplar to Hercules, the alder to Pan, the olive to Minerva, the fig and the vine to Bacchus, the lotus to Hermes. The leek of Wales, like the shamrock of Ireland, was an object of worship in the East and was associated with Virgo. The Hortus Coensis states that it first came to Britain in 1562. The mandrake, or love apple, was also sacred. Brenton gives a list of 7 such sacred plants among the Creek Indians. The vervain, sacred to Druids, was gathered in Egypt at the rise of Sirius the dog star. Interesting stuff. Well worship. And quite a big chapter again. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this finished. Let's see. How far away are we, guys? Well worship. We've got quite a few left. I think it's going to have to be another video, guys. I'll read for another 10 minutes or something like that, but it looks like I'm going to have to do one final video after this. So I'll read till past, which is another 13 minutes. But this looks like I said, I can't really make a judgment of how long I'm going to be, because some chapters are big and some are tiny, so there's no rough sort of estimate. Right, well worship. And I didn't want to just speed through them. I want to read them and take it in as well. I didn't just want to skim through it. Because you know what it's like, guys, when you read, sometimes you're just skimming and you to the next paragraph and you didn't really take it in. I want to be able to read it and take it in. That so wet a country as Ireland should have so great a reverence for Wales is an evidence how early the primitive and composite races there came under the moral influence of Oriental visitors and rulers who had known in their native lands that the want of rain, the value of wells. So deep was this respect that by some the Irish were known as the people of wells. In remote ages and realms, worship has been celebrated at fountains or wells. They were dedicated to Suam in India. Sopar Soma was the fountain of knowledge. Oracles were delivered there. But there were cursing as well as blessing wells. Wells were feminine, and the feminine principle was the object of adoration there, though the specific form thereof changed with the times and faith. In Christian lands, they were dedicated, naturally enough, to the Virgin Mary. It is, however, odd to find a change adopted in some instances after the Reformation. Thus, according to a clerical writer in the Graphic 1875, a noted Derbyshire well and its annual festival on Ascension Day, when the place was adorned with crosses, poles, and arches. All was religiously done in honour of the Trinity, the vicar presiding. Catholic localities still prefer to decorate holy wells on Our Lady's Assumption Day. So they're saying here that the wells are associated with the feminine, and the feminine is associated with Mary in Christianity, kind of thing. So that's how they connect the old heathen customs to Christianity. It was in vain that the early church, the medieval church, and even the Protestant church sought to put down well worship, inheritance of extreme antiquity. Strenuous efforts were made by councils. That of Rouen in the 7th century declared that offerings made there in the form of flowers, branches, rags, etc. were sacrifices to the devil. Charlemagne issued in 789 his decree against it, as did our Edgar and Canute. As Scotland caught the infection by contact with Ireland, it was needful for the Presbyterian Church to restrain the folly. This was done by the Presbytery of Dingwall in 1656, though even worse practices were then condemned, as the adoration of stones, the pouring of milk in hills, and the sacrifice of bulls. In 1628, the Assembly prohibited visits to Christ wells at Falkirk on May mornings, got a law passed and sentencing offenders to a fine of £20 Scot and the exhibition in sackcloth for 3 Sundays in church. That's strange. So I suppose you have to wear a sackcloth, like a potato bag, at church for 3 Sundays in a row or something in church. Another act was put the offenders in prison for a week on bread and water. Muhammad even could not hinder the sanctity attached to the well Zamzam at Mecca. More ancient still was holy Beersheba, the 7 wells. Wales, especially North Wales, so long and intimately associated with Ireland, had many holy wells, as St. Thecla at Llandegla and St. Wilfrid's of Flintshire Holywell. St. Madron's well was useful in testing the loyalty of lovers. St. Brewer's well cured bad eyes and received offerings in cash and pins. St. Clear's was good for nervous ailments and benefited the insane. The Druid magician Tregeagle is said still to haunt Dosmere Pool. Henwen is the old lady well. The Hindu Vedas proclaim that all healing power is in the waters. Hydromancy, or divination by the appearance of water in a well, is cherished to the present time. One Christian prayer runs thus: Water, water, tell me truly, is the man that I love duly, on the earth or under the sod, sick or well, in the name of God. Irish wells have been rebaptized and therefore retain their sanctity. A stout resistance to their claims seemed to have been made a while by the early missionaries, since St. Columba exorcised a demon from a well possessed by it. They all, however, like to resort to wells for their preaching stations. In one of the lives of St. Patrick, it is related that he preached at a fountain well, which the Druids worshipped as a god. Milligan assures us the Celtic tribes, starting with hot countries from where wells were always of the utmost value, still continued that reverence for them which had been handed down in their traditions. This opinion may be controverted by the ethnologists, but Croker correctly declares that even now in Ireland, near these wells little altars or shrines are frequently constructed, often in the rudest manner, and kneeling before them, the Irish peasant is seen offering up his prayers. It is not a little singular that these unconfined Irish churches should be in the contiguity with the holy oaks or holy stones. Sorry about that, guys. Got a brain freeze there. Professor Hartung, in his paper before the Historical Society, remarked of the Irish, they have from time immemorial been inclined to superstition. He even believed in their ancient practice of human sacrifices. Pilgrimages to wells are frequent to this day. The times are fixed for them as the 1st of February in honour of Tober Bridget, or St. Bridget's Well of Sligo. The bushes are draped with offerings, and the procession must move round as the sun moves, like the heathen did at the same spot so long ago. At Tober Conneil, or St. Connell's Well, the correct thing is to kneel, then wish for a favour, drink the water in silence, and quietly retire, never telling the wish of desiring its fulfilment. Unfortunately, these pilgrimages, often to wild localities, are attended with characteristic devotion to whiskey and free fights. At the Holy Well, Tibber or Tober, Quan, the water is first soberly drunk on the knees, but when the whiskey in due course follows, the talking, singing, laughing, and love-making may be succeeded by a liberal use of the blackthorn. In the story of the well of Kilmore is an allusion to mystical fishes. An old writer says, they do call the said fishes Isa Shant, that is to say, holy fishes. In the charming poem of Dermid, there is an account of the night of the fountain and the sacred silver cup from which the pilgrim drank. Giraldus, the Welsh seer, beheld a man washing part of his head in the pool at the top of Slieve Gullion in Ireland. When the part immediately turned grey, the hair having been black before, the opposite effect would be a virtue. Professor Robertson Smith, while admitting well worship as occurring with the most primitive of peoples, finds it connected with agriculture when the Aborigines had no better knowledge of a god. The source of our spring, said he, is honoured as a divine being. I had almost said a divine animal. Such springs, remarks Rees, have in later times been treated as holy wells. River worship, as is well known, has been nearly universal among rude peoples, and human sacrifices not uncommonly followed. The river god of Estonia sometimes appeared to the villagers as a little man with blue and white stockings. Streams, like wells, are under the care of local deities. Even our river Severn was adorned in the time of the Roman occupation, as we know by Latin inscriptions. Wells varied in curative powers. St. Tegla's was good for epilepsy. Rickety children benefit from a thrice dipping. Some, by the motion of the waters when sometimes something is thrown in, will indicate the coming direction of wind. Some will cure blindness, like that of Rathlogan, while others will cause it, except to some favoured mortals. Offerings must be made to the spirit in charge of the well, and to the priestess acting as guardian. If in any way connected with the person, so much the better. A piece of a garment, money touched by the hand, or even a pin from the clothes is sufficient. Pins should be dropped on Saint's Day. If good luck be sought. As Henderson's folklore remarks, the country girls imagine that the well is in charge of a fairy or spirit who must be propitiated by some offering. Some well spirits, as Peg O'Neill of the Ribble, can be more mischievous. Besides the dropping of metal or the slaughter of fowls, a cure requires perambulation, somewise, three times round the well. On Saint's Day, wells are often dressed with flowers. There's probably a reason why you see coins in wells. This tradition of throwing a coin in a well probably comes from all this. Otway has asserted that no religious place in Ireland can be without a holy well, but Irish wells are not the only ones favoured with presents of pins and rags, for Scotland, as well as Cornwall and other parts of England, retain the custom. Mason names some rag wells: Ardclines of Antrim, Errigal Cerog of Tyrone, Dungiven, St. Bartholomew of Waterford, St. Bridget of Sligo. The spirits of the wells may appear as frogs or fish. Gomey, who has written so well on the subject, refers to a couple of trout from time immemorial in the Tobar or well of Kieran, Meath. Of two enchanted trout in the Galway pigeonhole, one was captured. As it immediately got free from the magic, turning into a beautiful young lady, the fisher, in fright, pitched it back into the well. Other trout protected wells are recorded. Salmon and eels look after Tobar Monachan, the Kerry well of Ballymorey. Two blackfish take care of Kilmore well. That at Carmichael of Banff has only a fly in charge. The point of the legend is, writes Robertson Smith, that the sacred source is either inhabited by a demonic being or imbued with demonic life. It is useful in the event of a storm near the coast to let off the water from a well into the sea. This draining off was a practice of islanders of Innismurray. The Aran islanders derive much comfort from the casting into wells flint heads used by their forefathers in war. Innisrea has a holy well near the Atlantic. What was the age of well worship? The president of Folklore Society, who deems original worshippers non-Aryan, i.e. before Celts came to Ireland, identifies the custom with the erection of stone circles. The scientific anthropologist General Pitt Rivers tells us it is impossible to believe that so singular a custom as this, invariably associated with cairns, megalithic monuments, holy wells, or some such early pagan institutions, could have arisen independently in all these countries. Enough has been said to show, as Wood Martin observes, that water worship, recommended by Seneca, tolerated by the church in times of yore, is a cult not yet gone out. But one has written, the printer's blanket somehow smothers miracles, and small pica play the very mischief with sanctified wells. Right, guys, I'm going to call it a night of that. It's exactly past. It was good to see you back again, Epic, Sonia, Ulick, D, David. Nice to see you, David. Barbara. I think I got everybody. Was it who was right at the top again? No Mask, and No Mask as well. I can't forget No Mask. Right, guys, so it's going to be one more reading after this, I think, and I'll be probably tomorrow night. And I hope to see you there. And I'm going to eventually gather all these together and put them on my website in an organised manner. So I hope you have a good week, guys, and I'll see you in my next broadcast. Cheers.